If you're anything like me, you wonder where it is that Uranus and Neptune figure into this whole saga of the god planets. The only thing you ever hear about it is that Kronos replaced his father. That's it. To me, that implies a history there, and I've always wanted to know. Enter Miss Tess Clark, who has a completely different, unique point of view. We're here to meet her and see what she has to say. She's an inquisitive, skeptical person, independent researcher and author, stargazer, nature lover, creative, artistic, empathic, a bit of an animal whisperer. She considers herself very fortunate to have traveled all around the world as well. She has some pretty interesting things to say about Uranus or Ouranos. Please try to look at this as interesting information that is being discussed. By no means am I trying to say it was a fact or it really happened. It's just a different side of it being looked at, conclusions that she has drawn. As Walt Thornhill said, no information can be discarded. But I guarantee you it is truly interesting, and there'll be a couple places that might just blow your mind. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Miss Tess Clark. So what made you decide to move to Sweden? You just wanted to? I would love to do that.
Yeah, I like traveling. And I had some family here, and I lived in several countries, and I find that the people here are very, very obedient.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to criticize, there's nice people, but just the system is quite interesting.
It's like that everywhere now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess each country has its problems. But anyway, so I'm here, and I might go back to the United States.
Mm-hmm. So what got you involved in catastrophism and the myths and all that? How'd you get first into it?
Like yourself, I heard what you were saying about yourself in the interview, your last interview, and I've always loved cosmology, and always watched anything I could of documentaries or Cosmos. You know, obviously everyone that likes cosmology watched Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and of course, and I was just always looking at the stars, and just I love geology too, but I didn't go that route. I went into the arts, kind of artistic too, but so I went that way. I paint, and I was doing interior design, and I did that kind of for school. I got a BA degree in art and design, and I also was reading a lot about history. And I traveled with my parents when I was younger to Europe, and which I loved because I was very interested in all the architecture and the medieval buildings and castles and museums, and of course Greece. I loved going to Greece. I went there when I was 14, and Ephesus, and I really, really just loved all the history. And so I got both into cosmology and history about I've always been interested in cosmology, but then because of the 2012 debacle, I started learning and researching a lot into the Mayan calendar, and I lived in Mexico, so I knew a little bit about that too, and I've seen some of the sites, the pyramids, and there was so interesting as well. So I got a little bit more into that side of the Mayan, and just the Aztec. I mean, there's a lot of groups in Mexico, the Olmecs, and all of that. I got into learning, and just more recently, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I learned about Velikovsky, luckily. He's amazing. I mean, unbelievable. And I read all his books, and I went into the archive and read all his archives and articles, which is pretty big. And his biography, and he was wonderful because he shared with people something that was not supposed to be for the mass consumption. It was only supposed to be for the few. And I think that's why he got so much, problems, and they just pushed him down because he was not supposed to be talking about this. And then from then on, I started researching all his references. I went into every single reference I could, and I started reading all the people that he mentioned in the books, which is quite big. And of course, I haven't been able to do everything, to read everything, but I've gotten to learn a lot, and it's amazing.
Yes. When did you start writing?
I started researching and putting together notes probably about 3 years ago, just to kind of just compiling just for myself, so I could understand, because I want to understand. Yeah, I wanted to just understand, get a picture of at least the last 10,000 years, because we don't know it. As you know, it's really hard to tell with all the catastrophes. Everything gets erased off the face of the earth, and it's very hard to know. So I just would be happy with understanding a little bit more about the last 6,000 or 8,000 or 10,000 years. And so I focused on, well, I guess that's all you can focus on reading from the Greeks and of course the epics of the Sumerians, and the Indians. The Hindus have amazing, actually I recommend reading. I haven't gotten into reading all of it, but they have amazing descriptions of the plasma discharges and all the events, the catastrophes that were happening during the wars, which is like the Mahabharata, which is like the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's like the same thing in their own version, but it's much larger.
How many books have you written? I see that you got the Golden Age of Ouranos.
Yes.
And
then
Mythos.
I got, it's like companions or additions to the Mythos and Cosmogony, which is the first one.
Mm-hmm.
The first one and the longest one, as you could see.
What year did you write that?
Well, I just started putting everything together into books just recently.
Okay.
Just when I started the website to have them to share them, I decided to share them, to put them there for free for everyone to check them out. And I, like yourself, I wasn't there when everything happened or allegedly happened.
Right.
And we don't have a time machine, and we don't belong to a secret society, so we don't have the full records of what happened. So we're trying to put the dots together from what we can discern from all the texts, the sacred text and mythology. And so I put together this probably a year and a half or a year ago about all of these books. So I continued, and I think I have Mythos and Cosmogony, and then I wrote the Golden Age of Ouranos.
That's good.
The Apotheosis of Alexander the Great and Cyrus the Great, Worldwide Civilizations and the Kem and Nowak, which is, the Kem and Nowak is very little known civilization that started the basically 3600 BC in Mexico, in the valley of Mexico City, where you have Mexico City. Well, that whole, it's a big valley, but Mexico City is included in there. And the Kem and Nowak is basically it's basically the Egyptians and the Sumerians, well, from Egypt, that went to Mexico. If you read the links, you can kind of put them together. And there are some documentaries I also found out about the people from New Zealand. I don't know if you've seen that, about the red hair people of New Zealand, Rh negative bloodline that arrived. There's people that are alive and they're blonde, blue eyes, and they have been living in the Polynesia Islands since 3500 BC, and they know that their history, that the survivors from the war described in the Mahabharata, which is probably the Venus events or the Venus and Mars events, which I believe from the research is around 3600 BC. And that's the time that they say also that their ancestors migrated first to the American continent from India and Persia.
Mm-hmm.
And they arrived in the American continent around to Mexico, well, in that area of Mexico. Then they went southwards, and of course some of them could have gone northwards, of course. And then they migrated to the Polynesian islands and to Easter Island and all that, which matches the research of Brian Forrester as well. So that was really nice because it kind of confirmed what I have been putting together.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy your outlook because Uranus has been this nagging question that's been on my mind for some time. As you
Yes.
know, Velikovsky's writing about it. Really, anyone, all I ever see was that Saturn replaced his father, you know,
Right.
and that's all you hear. Well, that implies a history to me, and there had to have been something that happened there, and someone noticed it. And also, there is a link with astrology. I think Uranus depict is what represents heaven in astrology. So there has to be something there, and it kind of goes against the grain. For that reason, I would think about it and then go, I'll delve into it some other time. And then you came along, and it just kind of it tripped itself. And so, what made you go that route?
Precisely what you're saying. It was just kind of ignored, but it's ignored by most people. Well, because it's not their fault. It's because of the Greek classic writers, historians.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who started changing. Well, they came up with the term Golden Age, and then they ascribed it to Saturn, not to Uranus, and so people just go from that, like from Plato. There's like a couple Hesiod. There's a couple writers that have come to the Western to be known as the main writers of like Atlantis and pre-Diluvian civilizations, including the Golden Age. So that's where people get most of their information. But if you actually read, for example, the whole mythology tells you a different story. It doesn't start, like you said, with Saturn. It starts with Uranus.
Yeah.
As the first ruler, and if you read Diodorus Siculus, he also tells you that Ouranos was the first ruler of mankind, which is interesting. He doesn't talk about him just like heaven, Father, heaven. No, he says he was a ruler, and then he civilized mankind, and it's during the time of like what the Golden Age would be supposed to be before the deluge. And so I started reading more about that and trying to understand and really see what does Golden Age really mean, and were people really free of work, and they didn't have to cultivate food, and the weather was wonderful and warm, and they didn't have to wear clothes for winter. And so I got into that, and I also read the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch tells you that Ouranos, basically, which he doesn't call it your Ouranos, but it would be the equivalent to the Lord or God. He doesn't call him God, he calls him the Lord. That's really what he calls him. And the angels and the archangels. And all of that exactly correlated with the time frame of the Golden Age, the age of Ouranos, the reign of Ouranos. And so I just went and got all the information I could, and I found the Roman god Janus, which you already know about, which is very interesting, and which is the same as Ouranos. The god Anu, or An, of the Sumerians and the Akkadians, it matches exactly the same descriptions. I put it together, and all the references are there in the book. And, I don't want to say this is the way it was. I just want people to look at the references and look at the sources and go read the books and read the sources and come up with their own decisions. Like I say in my webpage and on my websites, I said, just do your research, read my books, go to the sources, and make up your own mind.
Right, right. We all have our own little mythos
Yeah,
inside that we keep,
yeah,
you know, and we're putting the
exactly.
pieces of the puzzle in. Well,
That
I have to
resonates.
say, for anyone interested, you really have to read it because she puts it together really well. I really like what you wrote about the Roman year 46 BC. Now you're saying we had a 445-day year at that time?
Yes, and I just discovered something very interesting about that. The year 46, 44 BC actually, during Julius Caesar ascension. Right before that, the
Hmm.
year used to be 445 days long.
Yes. Yeah.
And then there was many changes. The calendar has really been changing a lot. It kept changing all the way to 27 BC. But Julius Caesar ascension was portrayed in his temple called the Temple of the Comet Star, according
Hmm.
to Pliny the Elder. And he had become the star, the eight-pointed star.
Hmm.
And the eight-pointed star is actually Venus. Venus used to
Yeah.
be the five-pointed star, but later on it became symbolized by the eight-pointed star, which I don't know why, but that's what I found out. So I thought, what?
Mm.
Why would
Yeah.
Venus be, portrayed? So maybe there was a close approach of Venus around that time that Velikovsky doesn't talk about because he stopped talking about catastrophes in the year 560 or 580 BC. That's when he stopped. But that
Yes.
doesn't mean that the orbits of Mars and Venus got completely stabilized. They were trying to become stabilized. But so, yeah, it's possible that either Mars or Venus came a little bit close to Earth and caused some, yeah, calendar change. According to Velikovsky, and I think he knows what he's talking about because he and his wife read during 10 years uh, a ton of books, everything, all the sources in Latin and Greek and Hebrew. The the Hebrews and the Jewish people have amazing information. So about all these catastrophes and time frames and everything, the
Hmm.
details, and he wrote that the calendars, when there's a calendar change, it's because the orbit of Earth or the axis or both or the moon, either the orbit of the moon was affected by a close approach, electromagnetic approach, of course,
Hmm.
of some comet or a planet. And
Hmm.
so I thought, oh, well, maybe there was something happening at this time, the 46, 44 BC. So yeah, there's something interesting to look at, and that's very recent. So not many people have written about it, but I'm trying to write about it in my books and just say that's it's very interesting. But
Yeah, the Orphic Mystery School, the bringer of light and shining one, that's all attributed to Venus. Is that what you're
no,
saying? Or I'm
no, the Orphic myths are really, really, really old. I think that's actually started with the egg, the cosmic egg,
yes,
which
that's what
I
I wanted to get
think.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is if you look at the cosmic egg, and that's basically the very, very beginning of the creation of the solar system and the planets and the gods. They call
Right,
them
right.
gods, but like Phaeton and Nyx, night, and Hemera, day. And that time, I think, is when Earth was in the cocoon, which probably seemed like an egg of a red dwarf. Now, if it's Uranus or Saturn, I don't know, but it maybe points to Uranus because of the Enuma Elish and other stories of creation, which say that Gaia and Uranus were inseparable and were together until Enlil came and
Hmm.
took away Earth from Uranus, which is
Yeah.
very interesting. It's like, okay, but I don't know. So let's say that Earth was inside of the cocoon and that was the egg of creation. And that's why the
Hmm.
egg was so important for such a long time. Well, that's what I think that it means.
Hmm.
And that's the Orphic myths. And but of course they continued and they are very similar to the myths of reincarnation and the wheel of reincarnation and ending these by doing, the reincarnation and suffering of mankind, just like the Hindus. So that's quite interesting.
Very interesting. And you mentioned a primeval god, Ether, and
Yes,
I've never heard that before. That's your first time.
yes, ether. So ether also could be the red plasma sheath, or I think it was a lot of infrared light in there, because that's what that could be the equivalent to what the Shekinah is supposed to be. And if you read my book, or where I mentioned the legends of the Jews, where they're describing when Adam lived in the Garden of Eden and how he was basking in the light of the Shekinah, and this light would prevent people from getting old and getting sick and disease. Like there was no disease that could come to mankind. So I think that maybe that's what the ether also could relate to. Maybe, maybe it's like a little mixed up. Maybe they don't tell you exactly. Sometimes there's different gods are part of like the same, let's say, situation, or how do you call it, cosmic scenario. So Hemera and Nyx, for example, they're two different gods of day and night, but you know what day and night are. So it's like the same, it's the same thing. They're just different aspects of nature, of course. And I think ether has to do with the red plasma sheath and the plasma. Maybe they're talking about the rarefied plasma, this environment that it's probably permeating the whole of the cosmic space. Space is not a vacuum. So maybe that's what they talk about, just like the Mayans. They talk about ether.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure, but it could be.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. Now, you mentioned Phanes here, the primordial god, Protogenos.
Right.
The creation of the Orphic cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now, who's Phanes?
Well, he was born when the cosmic egg was cracked by the serpentine coils of the goddess Ananke and
That's an
Saturn.
interesting name, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Ananke, if you look at her, that is like the plasma discharges. The electrical is be like the plasma discharges. Again, they're putting two gods into like the same scenario of let's say Saturn was going nova, or was throwing a CME towards Uranus when it was flaring, just like Velikovsky talks about, or that diamantine, what do you call this, that used to cut, I can't remember the name, a sickle.
Yes.
The sickle. It could have been the sickle described. And so I think that Phanes was born out of this catastrophe when Saturn was throwing electrical discharges or coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, towards Uranus. And so Ananke is the plasma discharges of Saturn. It's like the two together.
Yes. So Ouranos is the Greek personification of heaven. It would make sense because when you look at that thing that they got with astrology, it looks like the 10 heavens or whatever. And it's got all the planets from Saturn on down.
Yes.
Santos Benici goes over. What's left is or Ouranos. That would be what would be on top, where the souls filter down from. So I can understand why that would represent heaven.
Yes, and let me read to you about Phanes that you were asking me. I found it.
Good,
I don't remember every single detail. Of course, it's just too much to remember.
I know.
But yeah, this is interesting.
Yes.
Phanes, or Ophion, which is another aspect of Phanes, who was one of the primeval gods, born of the cosmic watery abyss in the Orphic mystery school, means bringer of light, or the shining one, or to shine. So that's interesting.
Yes.
So yeah, it makes you think of a star, right? Or a
Right.
nova or
Yeah.
something like that. And he gave birth to the other gods and planets of the universe and the solar system, visible to humankind. I think that had to do with the catastrophes. They're talking about, well, Thanos created the light of day and his consort Nyx created night. So I think what happened there, it was when when the Uranus, which people now talk about Saturn, when this disruption happened, and Earth was not in this cocoon of red light, and then suddenly the stars were visible and night was visible for the first time. People would experience, humans experience nighttime and daytime because it would be back and forth. This is what Thanos created. So it's just talking about this whole episode of the Orphic egg getting crushed by the forces of Saturn, which is the Siamese, separating Earth from heaven or the atmosphere. I think heaven could also refer to the atmosphere or the plasma sheath that used to surround Earth. Because if you also read about Ouranos, they tell you that it's very similar to the description of the goddess Nut of the Egyptians. And remember the goddess Nut, she's kind of like, her feet are on one side and then she's curved, she's going on top of Earth and there's stars around her. And then her arms she's like arching down on Earth.
Yes.
She's
Yes.
covering the whole sky, like visible sky. So she's like the equivalent also to Ouranos. And I think it's just all talking about this time frame of the red dwarf and being enveloped in the red dwarf. Yeah.
As if I didn't have enough to think about before, you come along and I feel like I'm swimming in a sea with water over my head, because I try to pay attention to this and then this hits me and then I get that. And then it's like, wow, wait a minute, something's going on here. Well, so now today we obviously know that Uranus is lying face down, rolling around the sun back out there past Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think that Uranus played into the situation? Do you think it was taken out
Well,
early?
well, yeah, definitely. I think, well, reading Belakovsky's In the Beginning,
Mm-hmm.
how he thinks, well, he thinks that
Then.
he thought that Earth must have been a part of a quadruple star system, which included Uranus, Neptune,
Yeah. Yes.
Saturn, but he
Yes.
added Jupiter. Now, I don't believe that Jupiter was part of that system. I think it was a triple star
Yes.
system with Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. And now Neptune and Uranus have disks just like Saturn. And that, what do you call it? Yeah, disks are dark disks around them. And Uranus is completely tilted sideways. It's not a little bit, well, it's not straight, or it doesn't have the same axis as Neptune, and of course Saturn. They have a different axis. And Uranus seemed to have been really like messed up by something,
Yes.
by someone. And I think that was Saturn, because from the stories of creation, I mean, there's a reason why they put the stories of creation with the describing the different planets doing something, something happening to them. And so I think that Earth was either orbiting, like I said, Uranus or Saturn or even Neptune. I'm not sure, but from the books and from the stories, it sounds like it was Ouranos or Uranus. And then this system was captured in the Birkeland currents of the sun, of the heliosphere, which is basically the Birkeland currents of the sun, and the magnetosphere of the sun. And then so it started to getting attracted to the solar system. And then Jupiter was a binary of the sun, and I think that Jupiter was a binary of this with the sun because it's correlated to the orbit of Jupiter. It's related to the sun cycle of sunspots. the 11-year sunspot cycle. So they have a relationship there, an astronomical relationship. And I don't know if you were aware of that, but they have that. So I believe that then this system was coming in, and with Earth, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, and it was captured by Jupiter first, because Jupiter is further back than the sun. And I believe that everything spirals, right? With Birkeland currents, they spiral.
Yes, yes.
So if you look, let's say you're looking at, and I wish somebody would do a rendering of these. I hope somebody that is listening will do this rendering with their in a computer. I don't know. But you look at the spiraling arms of the galaxy, and it looks flat like a plate. But if you, and the same like the solar system, you look at it and they always portray it flat, right? The sun in the middle, and then the planets just going around in different orbits sideways like a plate. But imagine you take that and you do a 3D, and then you have the galactic center, just like the sun would be in the front, and then you imagine a cone going behind it, and this cone, sort of like a cone, has the Birkeland currents, and the arms of the galaxy are spiraling just like that. And the planets would be behind the sun in the same, going in this, like following the same principles, would be like really the same principle as above, so below. And so that's why Jupiter would have been further back, in the tail of the sun. And that's why this system first encountered Jupiter. And Jupiter, of course, Saturn affected Uranus. Now, maybe Saturn got destabilized because it came into the Birkeland currents of the sun, which are much more powerful. I guess I don't know exactly how that works. If a Birkeland current has more energy than the rarefied plasma, and that it's in the, like we were talking about, in the, not the vacuum, but in the rest of the cosmos. And so Saturn gets destabilized, and then that destabilization causes it to flare, and that flaring also has, has like a trickle effect, because everything is connected through the Birkeland currents. So then that goes out of its normal electrical stability, and it reflects on Uranus and even Neptune. I don't know when Neptune went nova, but when they go nova, they get these rings. So we know that Saturn has the rings after going nova. So Uranus and Neptune also have those rings. So they must have had some kind of episodes there where they ejected water or whatever, going a little nova, I don't know, a lot nova. If they were little stars, they could have been just tiny little stars.
Yeah. I can see a triple, like a trinary, if you will, system rolling through space, and got a little too close to the sun, and all hell broke loose.
I think that's what happens in the galaxies. I think it's just what's continuously happening. It's like the normal thing.
This drama is probably playing out somewhere as we speak. If you notice, we have Alpha Centauri out there with the two stars that are in orbit around each other. There is another red dwarf called Proxima Centauri. Now, if that were to get close to those two main cycle stars, the same thing would probably happen.
Exactly.
And I can picture it in my mind just so clearly. Three stars. I mean, imagine the weather would have been just beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And no parts of the earth were dead at that time, because, I mean, that's basically what happens, right, with a desert. It's just that part of the planet dies.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you have the Roman god Janus. I know you talked about it a little bit. He's not known very much now. That's where we get January from, right?
Exactly.
He's the father of Zeus. Talk about Janus.
Okay, well, he's the Roman god. And his equivalent, well, look at the name. If you remove the I, now I just wanted to say, in ancient text, everything was written with an I, and then it changed to a J. So Janus became Janus, and that's where January comes from, with a J. And so that's interesting. And in books, in old books that you can see like from the medieval times that were already being printed, if you take a look, the year 1 was written with an I. Did you know that? That's also interesting.
Yes, I did know
Okay.
that. Yes, that
Some people
the
don't
I
know.
eventually got turned into a
Yeah,
1.
exactly. So some people
Hmm.
don't know that. So they look at the number and they go, oh, there's not a 1. No, it is. It was a 1. That's the way it was because of the print, the way they had to be able to print, or they didn't have the 1, who knows? But
Hmm.
anyways, and they use Roman numerals too. They didn't use 1, by the way. They used Roman
Right.
numerals when they were numbering the timeline or everything, the pages and everything. But anyways, going back to the Roman god Janus. So I call him Janus because it's like the original way of saying it. So he's father of Zeus. So Zeus is Jupiter. Um, he's also called Yani, and he's very similar to An, right? The Sumerian name of An or Anu, Janus. So it's very similar, I think. So he's the father of Zeus, and of the royal lineage of the Romans is identical to the Sumerian lord Anu, which is what I was just telling you. Anu is also the Roman Caelus or Ouranos, and Janus is the equivalent of Caelus or heaven and Uranus. And he was the mythical, Janus was a mythical sky or heavenly god, or divum deus in ancient Latin. And he was the one responsible for the golden age. According to the myth, Janus was the first king of Latium, or where the name Latin word comes from, Italy. And it's credited with bringing civil and social order to mankind. He brought humanity from barbarity to civilization, exactly like the description of Ouranos by Diodorus Siculus. He established worship and religion. He was the first ruler to mint coins and use money, which I think is very interesting, because if there was coins and money in the golden age, that doesn't sound like a golden age to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he is associated with trade, the streams, the springs, with beginnings and endings. And so he has a double face, beginnings and endings, and transitions. Janus was worshipped as the sun. So he was the main star of planet Earth. And one of his wives was called Yana, and she was worshipped as the moon. So it's the same kind of story of Uranus and then the moon. The moon was the second deity to appear. And let's see what else I can tell you about Janus. Another myth about Janus. Saturn, oh, this is interesting. Saturn, after being exiled by Jupiter from heavens, or after Saturn goes nova and Earth was captured by Jupiter, that's my understanding, Saturn became smaller and more distant from Earth. Saturn, okay, this is what happened. Saturn arrived on a ship to the Janiculum, which were the domains of Janus, the god Janus, or probably Uranus, which is the former place of Earth from this descriptions. The god was received warmly by Janus, the god Saturn was received warmly by Janus, and in return for his hospitality bestowed on the king, Saturn, the power to see both into the future and into the past. The cult and worship of Janus was very ancient in Rome, and his name was invoked before any sacrifice. And so he is equivalent to the god Uranus, and the god Anu. The beginning day of the year, January, is named for him. There's some ancient temples called the Agonium. The Janiculum also means the city on the mountain or dwelling place of Janus. So he is shown with two faces, one looking forward and the other backwards. Sometimes he's shown as a clean-shaven man and sometimes as an old bearded man. And there's arches also that have his face, or arches and gates. You know, the entrances like the Arch of the Triumph, Those are the arches. They're very, very ancient, and from the time of the Sumerians. And these are sort of like his symbols. And they are equivalent to the Tori or the Shinto gates, which demarcate sacred space as opposed to ordinary space in the Buddhist and Hindu, or the Torana, which is the gateway that marks sacred from normal space. So, yeah.
Yeah, I found that very interesting. Just to backtrack just for a second, one thing that you said here that I thought really made a lot of sense was that Saturn is the god of harvest.
Yes,
That implies work, right? Talk
exactly.
about that. I mean,
Yeah, the
that's
end of work. Yeah, after
right.
the whole year is done, then you go and harvest
Yeah,
for
yeah,
your
but
growing season.
for the golden age, there was no work. Nobody worked. It seems. I don't know if they built houses or not, but it seems that a god of work would not signify a golden age. That was good. I
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
yeah. Ouranos, one more thing about them, like the difference between Saturn and Ouranos. Saturn is the god of time, Chronos. Chronos
Right.
means time, but that is measurable time, which means the four seasons begin, and the time, you could track time. If there was no stars to be seen, you can't really, and the light of the day doesn't change, you can't really track time. So that's why during the time of Ouranos, he was the god of eternal time. There was no ending of time, there was no measurement of time. But when Saturn came along and he castrated Ouranos and caused all the catastrophes, then you could see the sky, and then you could see nighttime and daytime. You could see the stars. You could see the day moving on your clock. You could put down a clock day. What do you call it? Like those the clocks that they put in the ancients, where you could see how it's moving with the sun movement,
You mean like a
with the
sundial?
shadows.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, a sundial.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that didn't exist when Uranus was reigning, but did exist when Saturn was reigning. So that also doesn't denote eternal time and all the other golden age kind of um, adjectives and
Hmm.
descriptions.
Yeah, that's great. And Ouranos equivalents in world mythologies. So his equivalents in Yanu would be Ouranos, right?
Yes, exactly. Uranus is
Yes.
sky or heavenly or sky father. He was called the Sky Father or Heavenly Father, and the Lord An or Anu of the Sumerians and the Akkadians, and the Roman Caelus, which means heaven, like cielo. That's the Spanish word for heaven. Caelus. That's the Roman Latin for sky. So those
Yes.
are the same gods.
Diodorus Siculus tells of the ruler called Ouranos that foretold many planetary changes during his life. I love that part right there. And
Mm-hmm. Knew what
Odin,
was coming.
yes, for
Troubles were
sure.
ahead. Yeah.
And when you get trying to find down towards the bottom, there was some stuff that I wanted to talk about, and I didn't write it down. Darn it.
Do you know you don't know what was
Go ahead.
do you know what was the main subject? And I can look it up here in the PDF.
Uh,
Or we can go.
Key. I think it was Key.
Key? Earth?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Saturn captures the Earth from Uranus. So you're saying that at one time Earth was a planet of Uranus's or Oranos?
Well, that's what the story seems to tell.
Mm-hmm.
They were inseparable. Yes. Key was both the wife,
Mm-hmm.
the consort of Uranus. So that means that they were together,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And Earth or Gaia or Terra, which are all the same names in different languages for Earth or Gaia, was now in some stories it was the mother of Ouranos, but I think that's just one of the Greeks or Roman historians that gives him that that's his mother, but I don't think so, because that doesn't make sense that Earth would give birth to to a star. That would be really strange.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty strange.
Yeah.
So I think that it's more correct to say that Earth was the consort of Ouranos, and she was probably orbiting Ouranos. And then when Ouranos was castrated by Saturn, that's when from his severed testicles, that's what it says. I'm sorry to talk about these.
No, that's okay.
But well, that's what it says. That they fell in the ocean, and from the foam came Aphrodite. And Aphrodite is not Venus. Aphrodite is the moon.
The moon, yes.
It's been misinterpreted by some historians to be Venus, but it's definitely not Venus. It's the moon. And the moon was the second planet to be worshipped during the time of Adam. They said that Adam came from the moon. I don't know if you have heard that.
Yes, I have heard that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then you get into Alalu, which you have Neptune, the question mark, was the king of heaven, seated in the throne. And dominating Red Door started 9 shars. The only time I've heard shar is the Anunnaki thing.
Yes, I have to say something about the shars too when you're done.
Go into it. No, I want you to expand on it. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I put it on this PDF, but it's definitely on the Mythos and Cosmogony, where I speak of shars, how they were misinterpreted I believe in the 1640s AD or 1700s by, I think, Halley, the astronomer Halley, I believe, or somebody else that was reading all this ancient text. And shars was actually referring to lunar years of moons. It had nothing to do with years, like we know. Now that's interesting because you see, Earth was not orbiting one star. If you think about it, like the whole capture event and how it kept moving and being from Uranus captured by Saturn and then captured by Jupiter and then captured by the sun. So it just was moving. It just kept moving, spiraling. If anything, Earth is like Nibiru. Earth is just like a planet that is coming into the solar system, which is funny to think about. We're like the aliens, really, in our spaceship. Planet Earth, think about it. Yeah. But the shars was actually lunar, a lunar calendar, and it was tracking the moon. They would look at the moon because they didn't have the sun to go around and actually keep track of the sun because it kept changing so fast. So it was all, in all the calendars, according to Isaac Newton, he talks about this, all the calendars of ancient times until very recently were all moon calendars. And that's why they were moon calendars, because the moon was the only thing that was kind of stable around Earth. There was no other star that was stable. Everything was crazy, changing just like basically every 100 years or 300 years or 700 years, things kept changing, misinterpreted. So a shar, well, there's a shar, a saru, a saroi, a saru. There's like all these different terms, which means saroi is like half a sar and a saru. So you have to go back and read my explanation. And people can go and just browse on the internet and say saros, the Babylonian saros. And they will understand that this 3,600 year, it's completely crazy. It does not make any sense. It's not what they were saying. It's not what it's about. So all the king's lists became really, really long. All the king's list of Berosus and Manetho and the Egyptians, but especially of the Sumerians, they became like 340,000 years long, and that does not make any sense. But then if you go back and read what the shar means, which is actually an orbit, they translated it as an orbit or a year orbit. And shars were used before the deluge and before basically the Earth was captured by Saturn, which is interesting because they're named shars. And after the deluge, the years are given on years. There's no more shars that become years, like Earth years. But a shar means an orbit. They were trying to calculate a year orbit. And I think one shar is about 18 years of our now current years.
That's very, very interesting.
It's confusing. Yeah, but
Yeah.
you have to go and read it because it is very confusing. And unfortunately, it's stuck. And it's stuck with since the 1600s until now, unless you go and read. Yeah.
You have the Hittite story, Kingship in Heaven, says that three gods ruled heaven. And this would sync up with the trinary system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Alu,
Giving you a hint.
Neptune was the king of heaven.
Yeah. Neptune, Alalu, probably Alalu.
Yeah. And Anu battles Alalu.
Which is Uranus. Anu is definitely Uranus. Okay, well, the Hittite story of kingship in heaven, that's the name, says that three gods ruled heaven. Alalu, which could be Neptune, and is similar to Greek mythology of Neptune, from the city of Urkesh. Anu, who is Uranus, and Kumarbi, who is Saturn. Alalu, Neptune, was the king of heaven, seated in the throne, and I think the throne means that he was the main star, dominating star, the red dwarf. Now, maybe Earth orbited Neptune. It's possible. I don't know, but this is what it's kind of hinting to. And they were close to each other, so it's possible. And then for 9 shars, or yearly orbits, Anu, or Uranus, battles Alalu, which means that they have electric interactions and cause catastrophes on Earth and on other planets that were orbiting. I mean, of course, they had other moons and planets, and they could have been Mars, Ganymede, any of the planets that exist today around us, or moons that are around Jupiter, and especially Jupiter. I think Jupiter captured a lot of the moons and planets from these other Neptune and Uranus. And so the moon could have been a satellite of Uranus, allegedly, from these descriptions. So then after Alalu battles Uranus, Uranus overthrows Alalu. So Uranus is the one who wins in this battle. And Alalu proclaims himself the ruler of the universe. Anu was king for 9 shars. So it's telling you 9 orbits. Anu was king, so he was the main star, or where that Earth was probably orbiting around, and that's why it becomes the main star. Right. Which means that Uranus probably captured the planet Earth doing 9 orbits. Then Kumarbi, which is Saturn, battles Uranus, or Anu. And he ate his genitals, just like the story of the... I mean, I know it sounds disgusting. It's like, what? These people are barbaric.
Yeah, they're just preoccupied with it. Yeah. His castration was used to explain the ruling star lost its planets and were captured by another star. That would explain the hodgepodge of moons that we got out there for all these planets, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Exactly. So for some reason, these people like to use those terms and this kind of explanation or the loins. So when they capture the planets from the other planet, so Saturn battles Uranus, and he captures the planets from Uranus, which means Saturn's have interactions with Uranus, electrical interactions, and Uranus probably went nova. And because there was a flood before Noah's flood. So there was 2 floods that also people need to know about. And I talk about that in my books. And so Noah's flood, and then there's a previous one. So this flood where Uranus caused Saturn to capture the planets that orbited Uranus. Sorry, this interaction. There probably was one flood right then. And then Uranus Anu managed to fly back to his heavenly abode. Uranus retreated to a distant place in space. That means that he flies back to his heavenly abode. Uranus retreats, so Earth is captured and Uranus stays in the background and is not to be seen anymore, and he's kind of like forgotten. He goes away. After these interactions with Saturn, possibly after going nova, Kumar B controls Earth only. Kumar B, remember, Kumar B is Saturn. So this is interesting. It says that Kumar B controls Earth, which means captures Earth, only for a short time, which means Saturn captures Earth for a short time. So that's interesting that it talks about that.
Yes.
Then the last part is Uranus or Anus satellites produced several deities that orbited Saturn. That means that the satellites of Uranus became planets of Saturn when they were captured, including Jupiter. I don't know, but it says that, including Teshub, which is Jupiter, possibly, because that's who Jupiter is, Teshub, a Hittite chief deity. Uranus Anu was overthrown by his son Kumar B, or Saturn, the one who bit off his genitals in combat, and is very similar to the story of Jupiter and Saturn, giving birth to his son, the storm god Teshub, Jupiter. Teshub, with Anu's help, deposes Kumar B, who is Saturn, and became the ruler. So Teshub is Jupiter, and that's how the story ends.
Mm-hmm. That is great.
Yeah.
Now, do you think more than one planet was occupied by humans?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if these people, that the gods that are called the gods, if they indeed came down from heaven like the Watchers or the Igigis and the Sumerians and the Watchers, who are the fallen angels of the Book of Enoch, and the Elohim, if they really came down to Earth, they were probably close by. They were not very far away. And I'm sure that if they came here, they could have gone anywhere else, and probably Mars and Ganymede and many other moons that are completely all full of ice that we can't see anything in there. I'm sure they could have been inhabited.
And all of a sudden, you have an explanation for the different races on Earth, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. And the blood types. Think about the blood types.
Yes.
Did you know that the blood types actually have like A, B? This is not even about Rh negative. This is just about A, B, and O.
Okay.
Blood type. Did you know that that means that they have, when you say A blood type, B blood type, or O blood type, that means that they have different immunities. That's immunity. So they don't have all the same immunity. They are not the same, like they can be immune to the same thing. So why would that be? That's kind of strange.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah, I've always wondered that.
Yeah, and that's why people cannot receive blood except from the same blood type or the O negative blood type, which is the only one that doesn't have any of the immunity, which is really bad.
Yeah, it is.
O negatives are very sensitive.
Yeah, how did that come about?
Viruses and bacteria.
Yeah. Diodorus Siculus on the Titan rulers of Atlantis. You have here the Titan rulers of Atlantis. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, this is great because Diodorus Siculus, nobody knows about Diodorus Siculus' stories of Atlantis, and he has way more information than Plato, like way more. Well, Plato has a lot of information in Timaeus and other books, but Diodorus Siculus, I was impressed with the rulers of Atlantis. So the Atlantioi, that's what they call the Atlanteans. Let's see. Well, it starts with Atlantis. That, by the way, Atlantis, if you read his book, it was not one island. It was the whole ocean and the territory around the coastlines of all the earth. That was Atlantis. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I was not aware of that. I knew it was more than just one city-state, but I did not know that. No.
So yeah, so that's really interesting. So you could say, for example, that all the temples. Of course, there was one big island that sank. Definitely. I mean, so many things sank. So many pieces of Earth completely got upside down, went under. Some were swallowed. Some other pieces of land were swallowed by volcanoes. Some other rose up in the mountains. I mean, there's been so many changes on the planet that it's unreal. But this is something interesting. When you look, for example, at I don't know if you know, along Italy, there's all these temples, ancient temples of Venus, and I can't remember the name right now. But they are sort of like the Athens, the Parthenon. They look like the Parthenon, and they look like Baalbek a little bit. Well, they're sort of like Baalbek. Of course, Baalbek is really destroyed, so you can't see the whole thing. But it would look like the Parthenon, basically. Well, all those buildings, I am sure that they were part of Atlantis, that they are still there. They're still intact. But a lot of them went under. They're now underwater because of the floods, many floods that have occurred. And of course, the biggest one from Noah's time, and the one before that. But anyway, so that's very important to understand that Atlantis was just not one little island somewhere. It's like all over the earth, and it was at the edge of Ouranos. That's what this is telling you. He says that the Atlanteans dwelling as they do in the regions on the edge of Ouranos, which is the ocean, and they are. Well, he explains their gods, how they say that they were born, the gods were among them, were born among them. So they believe that the gods were people, like humans, besides the planets. So the planets basically, so this is what happened with the lords, and it gets very confusing when you read mythology and the lords, the Sumerian lords. They actually told humans, because they had the knowledge, they had the secret knowledge and the astronomical knowledge, and they knew what was happening and when things were going to occur pretty much. They told them, I am that star, I control that star, and this other goddess is that star, and the forces of nature, of course, and day, night, and everything. But the stars, so they were sort of like shapeshifters, or they inhabited or controlled the planets and the stars. So, but this is interesting that Diodorus says that they were actually living people among them. They were not planets only. So the gods were living amongst them. So that's interesting to point to. And Homer talks about this, and he mentions the Iliad, the verse, and he just gives examples there. But then he goes to talk about the first king, Ouranos, which is Uranus or heaven. Right. That he gathered the human beings who dwelt in scattered habitations within the shelter of a walled city, and caused his subjects to cease from their lawless ways and in their bestial manner of living, discovering, it makes me laugh. Discovering for them the use of cultivated fruits, how to store them up. You mean they put them to work? They put them to work, and they show them metallurgy, so they make them miners, and they got them into mining, and they basically just, like we said, they just started civilization. And so he goes to talk about these, and let's see, you have any question before I keep going?
Oh, no, keep going. I'm loving it. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, he just talks about how he gave the masses civilization. The masses were all ignorant, and he showed them about the eternal arrangement of the stars. And people, they marveled at the knowledge that Ouranos had and the predictions that he had done, that when he died, they made him the star Uranus. They named the star Uranus after him. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it is. Yeah, very.
That's where this story comes from. Like, it explains why the name Uranus and where it comes from and why it was given to him. And they made him also the king of the universe because he was very knowledgeable and he understood how the planets and the firmament work and the stars and everything. So that's important to talk about, and people can go and read this for all the details. Then it goes to talk about how Uranus had all these children from a number of wives, and these were the Titans, and these Titans being Atlantis is one of them. That's where the name of Atlantean comes from. He's just one of the names of the rulers, of the children of Ouranos. Spread through the whole planet. Again, they were all around the planet, and they were ruling their different areas, which is very interesting.
The myth of Pangaea. Pangaea?
Pangaea.
Isn't it interesting that that was what they called the landmass on Earth?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, expand on that.
Okay, so he says that he took pleasure in tarrying in that place and in surveying from his lofty top. That means he probably had a pyramid or a beautiful Parthenon-like temple in a mountain where he had really good views of the heaven. And this place came to be called Trifilian, of the 3 tribes. Olympus, that's Mount Olympus.
Yes.
And okay, they were known as the Pankaioi, or the Pankaeans, this area. Okeanites and Doyans, who were expelled at a later time by Ammon. Okay, so he's talking about this land, how it was the land of these people, the Pankaia. And let's see, what else does it say? This island is situated on an exceedingly high hill, a sanctuary of Zeus Trifilius, which was established by him during the time when he was the king of all the inhabited world and was still in the company of men. So again, he's talking that like he's a person, he's a man with the company of men. So that's Zeus. We're talking about Zeus. And I think he's talking about the Mount Olympus. It was just called Pangaea, of the 3 tribes. That's basically what the story is about. The time when he was king of the inhabited world. Then he goes to say, and in his temple there is a stele of gold on which is inscribed in summary in the writing employed by the Pankaioi the deeds of Ouranos, Uranus, and Kronos and Zeus. Euhemeros goes on to say that Uranus, this is a historian, was the first to be king, that he was an honorable man. See, he's calling him a man.
Yeah, that
and
is interesting.
Beneficent, who was versed in the movement of the stars, and that he was also the first to honor the gods of the heavens with sacrifices. Okay, that's where all the sacrifices begin. Before the catastrophe, people start killing, because this is what these people told them to do. These lords or gods.
And by that time, we were all insane.
Yeah, I mean,
the whole
do you blame people? People were just going crazy. I mean, seriously, hard times. It wasn't easy.
No doubt. I'm glad I didn't have to endure it. You have here Uranus, primeval god of rivers and streams, and equal to chaos, who opened and flooded the earth.
Yeah, who flooded the earth? Did you see that?
Yes. It created the 4 seasons. So this is the first time snow appeared.
Exactly.
That is very interesting. And now the male titans were banished to Tartarus. I hear that Tartarus all the time. What exactly is Tartarus?
Okay, well, it has 2 meanings. One, like we said, as above, so below. They always mimic what happens. Tartarus is deep space. It's far away from Earth. Let's just put it that way. And Tartarus, that's where Uranus and Saturn were sent to, and Pluto and Uranus and Neptune, they were all sent away back then. Tartarus. Yes. But it's also volcanoes, or what was called hell. It's deep in volcanoes is where they used to imprison people and torture people.
It's terrible.
That's why I mean, they're mean. That's why they called Tartarus a place where they chained, who did they chain? One of the gods?
Prometheus.
Prometheus.
Yeah.
So I think that basically it means the deep space far away from Earth. Deep, like far away, okay? Yeah. But then there's something reciprocal on Earth.
Yeah, well, there's allegedly some country called Tartaria And I
Yeah, isn't
always,
that interesting?
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, I always wondered, what the difference was there, you know.
Well, you can
And,
always go to the etymology, to a dictionary of etymology every time you have a question of a word, and just type it in there, and it gives you a lot of information. Not a regular dictionary, but etymology, which means the root of the word, where it comes from.
oh,
And then that way
yes,
we
yeah,
can figure
it's,
it out if they both are related to tartar,
yes. So
Tartaria.
now Uranus was devouring his children as well, right?
Exactly. I
And
think that happened when he was becoming a nova and he expanded his field, and
mhm.
that's why they talk about devouring. I think that the whole thing of devouring is that
Yeah.
he's, when a planet is electrically, what do you call it? Well, electrified or electrically
Hmm.
excited, or gets amped.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's what they're referring to.
The nova ejecting large amounts of hydrogen, salt, water, metals, bacteria. So I've heard that before, that bacteria comes from space.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And viruses all the
Yeah.
time, all the
Yeah.
time. And that's why they have the flu, the yearly flu,
Yeah.
and keeps
Yeah.
changing.
Then we've got the cosmic timeline. You talk about that.
Okay, well, this is a little cosmic timeline. I have the whole cosmic timeline in Mythos and Cosmogony,
I mean,
according to.
everybody wants to know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, this is not what I say. It is because I say so. No, I'm just going and deciphering the books and going according to what the books are talking about, and knowing the saros, the shars, what the length really means, and then
Yes.
looking at the Bible and the years that they give you from Noah, the birth of Adam and Eve, and to Noah's flood, and then you can calculate. Okay, well, Uranus, it was the time of Adam and Eve, and then the first deluge happened, or flood happened during Uranus going nova, and we know that happened um, during the lifetime of Enoch, and Enoch was 699 years old when he died, and that's when the catastrophe happened, and that was 699 years before Noah's deluge. But I think he was like 300 years old or something. I have to go back and look. But 700 years before Noah's deluge, there was that flood. And which means that Uranus went nova. And then Saturn went nova when Noah's deluge occurred, because of the descriptions that I'm giving and the descriptions from the books. So yes, so we'll start. It's important to stress, since the time that Earth was captured together with its previous binary or triple solar system, when it possibly orbited Uranus, according to the descriptions in the epics of creation and mythologies, that the calendars were based on the moon, because Earth's orbit was not stable, orbiting around a single star. So then that's the first thing, right? Because these years that we're calling years, that's only according to now what Earth has as the Earth year right now. But we don't know what it was like before. It could have been much longer or much shorter, right? So just
Right,
something to
right.
point to. So it's very relative. You can't go like, oh, it was exactly this time of year. So we have to be flexible, thinking of, well, it could have been a little bit longer or shorter than our year, or Earth year, orbiting the sun. But anyways, so Earth's orbit, like I explained, was constantly changing, and so they could only have like a moon calendar, a lunar calendar. But what I calculate is that about 2,500 years before Noah's deluge, this is the epoch that was known as the creation of the world in the Anno Mundi timescale. So you have to look at the Anno Mundi, and that means the creation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So Anno Mundi began when Adam and Eve were created in the Garden of Eden. And Adam and Eve doesn't mean all of mankind, okay? It's not all mankind, not at all. It means the bloodline, the royal bloodline, because he was a high priest, and he was the royal bloodline of Adam and Eve. So that's exactly what this is talking about. Who are the patriarchs? Are part of the 10 patriarchs of the Old Testament. So this is who I'm talking about. And they were Adapa and Titi in Eridu of the Sumerians. So they have the same equivalents, and there's stories called Adapa and Titi, and also I don't know if you've read the book of Adam and Eve, but there's some really good texts that are not known.
I have not. I'm told it reads like a science fiction novel. I'm going to have to read that.
Yeah, you should. It's very, very interesting. And then this is the time of Shangri-La to the Buddhists, or the Golden Age, or Arcadia to the Greeks, and the era of the Golden Age, when the eternal dawn or dusk or reddish light and the light of the Shekinah shone. This is very important. In chapter 2 and 3 of the 10 generations of the legends of the Jews, this is a book that I completely have to say it's a must read. And Velikovsky talks about it a lot in the beginning.
What book is that again?
It's called The Legends of the Jews by Ginsberg.
Okay.
And it's all of the references are in the website and in most of the ebooks. Adam and his descendants sat by the gate to bask in the splendor of the Shekinah. So Adam and his descendants, 65,000 times more radiant than the splendor of the sun. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
That's really bright.
Yes, it
or
is.
Radiant, that's interesting. Radiant, maybe it's warmer. I think the word radiant could also be warmth, right? Like radiant heat. This brightness of the Shekinah makes all upon whom it falls exempt from disease, and neither insects nor demons can come nigh unto them to do them harm. So this is when I'm talking about the infrared light.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It's highly healing, prevents growth of viruses. I'm going to have to look into that. That's
it's scientifically proved, by the way.
Yes.
I found some very good links to actually scientists already using infrared, like doing, laboratory experiments.
I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, and get a red light bulb of infrared light if you have flame. Use it. It really works. I use one. Yeah. Then the Shekinah was made. This is very interesting. The Shekinah was made to leave the earth and ascend to heaven, amid the loud sounds of the trumpets of the myriads of angel hosts. Now remember, angel hosts, like I've mentioned, are planets. And the trumpets are the thunderbolts, the sounds of thunder and lightning of the discharges, of the electrical discharges. So this is what this is referring to. You created us angels from the splendor of the Shekinah. The souls of the pious changed to angels. So this is another interesting thing. The souls of the good people, and this is all along the religious texts, ascend or they change into planets or stars.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah. And the angels feed in the glory of the Shekinah in heaven, paradise. So that's what it says. Now, my interpretation is that the Shekinah's radiant splendor that prevented disease was made to leave the earth amid loud sounds or trumpets, means that the Shekinah was an infrared light or the healing light within the plasma sheath of the red dwarf Uranus. And upon Uranus going nova, as a result of Saturn's plasma sheath interacting electrically with Uranus' plasma sheath, Earth was captured by Saturn and exited Uranus' plasma sheath amid loud sounds caused by the thunderbolts, solar flares, or CMEs, or plasma discharges, described here as myriads of angel hosts. Of course, there could have also been planets and comets going by, because every time there's a catastrophe, a lot of things are happening, not just one comet. There's tons of comets, asteroids, bolides, fireballs, meteorites, all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's very interesting that musical instruments were created to mimic the sounds that they heard during this time. I think that is very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, the secret lore of the rabbis.
Okay, where are you?
I'm right. I'm right. Do you still have more to say on the...
Well, where are you? Well, no, it keeps talking. Okay, I see. Here.
I'm just kind of gradually meandering down. Yeah.
I'll read. The similar is in the secret lore of the rabbis. The first world or act of creation was when God robed himself in light, while the radiance of his glory called Zio Hadaro, illumined the world from one end to the other. And that's for Genesis, and there's the parts where you can find it. The light of the first day was such that by it the first man could see from one end of the world to the other. But finding that wicked men would arise on earth, God removed this light to reserve it for the righteous in the world to come. The luminaries received their light from the spark of that light of heaven, which is 100 times as bright as the light visible on earth. According to, and then this is where you can find it, Judges and Tabernacles and all these places. The light of the future will be 343 times, or 7 times 7 times 7 times as bright as the sun. Enoch speaks of the eternal light brought forth in the Messianic time. I wonder if they're talking about novas. It could be. The great light of heaven shone forth in splendor until Adam sinned, or it could be the red dwarf's plasma sheep. I don't know. But on account of the Sabbath, God would not withdraw the light before the day was over. Then when darkness set in, Abraham became afraid. So see, during the life of Abraham, he experienced darkness for the first time, and he became afraid. The Shekinah was identical to Yahweh in the Talmud. The Shekinah is also described as plasma discharges, or solar flares and thunderbolts of the planets Uranus, Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune, Venus, etc. Because, I say this because that caused the catastrophes in the last 6,000 years, well, according to the timelines of the Bible in the Old Testament, because the Shekinah descended to earth, or will have descended 10 times. Once to the Garden of Eden, another time when the Tower of Babel was built, another time to Sodom, another time to Egypt, another time to the Red Sea, so that's the time of the Exodus, upon Sinai, and again during the Exodus and Moses, another time in the pillar of the cloud during the Exodus, to the sanctuary, and it will again descend at the time of Gog and Magog. The Shekinah appeared also in the burning bush, and it was everywhere. So that's what it says in the secret lore of the rabbis. The Shekinah was possibly also some form of electromagnetic technology used at a time of war and kept in the tabernacle, because it was kept in a box. Those who were not properly protected died from exposure. 2 arks came up out of Egypt with Israel, one containing the Shekinah and the other the body of Joseph. The Shekinah resided at the east and then at the west. So the star must have changed positions relative to earth. Since the Shekinah is light, those passages of the Apocrypha and the New Testament which mention radiance, and which the Greek reads as, and then there's a Greek word, refer to the Shekinah, there being no other Greek equivalent for the word. The Shekinah was enthroned in heaven. That means it was like a star in heaven. It observed and scrutinized mankind. It sounds like the all-seeing eye of Osiris, and the star Saturn and Jupiter. Anyways.
Yes, I found that part very interesting as well. And we had the long lifespans, less weight during gravity.
Yes, exactly. That's the other thing. Well, people and animals, plants like dinosaurs and all these gigantic skeletons that are found could grow to a very gigantic stature, as Velikovsky points to, and the legends of the Jews talk about. And it was until during Abraham's time when man lost its gigantic stature. That's when a big mutation happened, and they shrunk so much more. But with each catastrophe, man shrunk, and I think it's because they exited this beautiful environment, and that's probably why they call it the Golden Age, or allegedly, because it was so much more friendly to you wouldn't get sick, you wouldn't get all these horrible parasites like everywhere in this planet. It's just horrible, really. It's tough. And people wouldn't get old, they wouldn't age, they would live very long, they would become gigantic, and they would die peacefully, allegedly, just like us in falling asleep. So that's good.
Yeah, were you the one who mentioned that there was a time when people could actually see people's auras?
Well, I think this is exactly what it's about. Yes. These would be the infrared light.
Yeah.
Our eyes can't see it now. It's outside of our range of perception.
Right.
Well, I believe that when we were in this environment of a red dwarf star, and it could have lasted until after Noah's deluge, and that's why the eyes were so much larger as well, because it was darker, and we just had different, the eyes that we needed were different, and they were larger probably, but we could perceive, because we lived in this environment, we could perceive what it's called auras, or the biofield, which now you can only see it with photography, like Kirlian photography, or with infrared binocular, what do you call it? Not binoculars, but eye gear. When you want to see planets and people,
Yes.
you have this kind of special goggles or
Night vision.
night vision. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that will allow us to have seen those, probably. I mean, I'm just speculating. And maybe that's where they say that we were telepathic. Maybe we were not exactly telepathic. I mean, probably there could have been something else that we don't understand, or so many different ways that our brains were working. But I think if you could see a person and you could say, oh, he's angry, or he's mad, or he's happy, then you wouldn't need to go and ask, are you angry, or are you mad? Or you would just, kind of know and just maybe understand. Yeah, maybe there was like more, also with animals, there was more, we could communicate with animals much more easier than now.
I've heard that before, yes.
People.
The catastrophes of Venus came approximately 1450 BC.
Exactly.
3,600 years ago.
Yes. And well, you could tell about the timelines because you look at the people who were reigning, the actual kings. And if you follow the, not only Velikovsky's timeline, he doesn't mention so many people that I have found, so many historians that are amazing. They tell you who was the king, who was ruling at the time, and that's when it happened. So that's how I came with these dates also that completely match Velikovsky's timeline, because he did such a meticulous research on that.
Yeah.
And
He inspired so many. Really will never. Eventually, the truth will come out, and it'll be because of Velikovsky, I think, because of his work. Yeah.
Definitely, he opened the doors.
Oh, for sure. The older Giza pyramid complex and Sphinx in Egypt might have been built during the first time the stars constellation of Leo became visible. So that's when you think that was built?
Yes, I mean, just from going by what the timelines of the Sumerian tablets say that the lords Anuna arrived about, I guess, 180 stars before the deluge of Noah, right?
Yeah.
So if you go back and you calculate the saros correctly, and then he gives you the time of the birth of each patriarch or king or ruler. And so yes, I calculated that, and also from the Egyptian kings list. Let's see, let's go back here. The building of existing megalithic sites. Well, I think the building of most of the existing megalithic sites that we can see, because imagine, again, we don't know how many times humans have been on this planet, because we can't tell, because with each catastrophe, everything gets obliterated and destroyed, and it changes upside down and gets completely different. So I think that what we can see now can't be really that old. Like some people say, oh, it's 36,000 years old. Well, I don't think it would have lasted 36,000 years, really.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't mean that nobody was here to build anything. I'm not saying that at all. I just don't know anything about back then. But this time, I do calculate that these buildings that we can see, like the pyramids, I mean, they're in an amazing state. They're in amazing shape. They're basically intact. The building of these existing megalithic sites probably began around 8,000 years ago, these ones that we can see. The older Giza pyramid complex and Sphinx in Egypt, Well, the Sphinx was originally a lion. That's what they say. I don't know, but that's what they say. And it kind of, because of the paws, it looks like a lion.
Yeah.
You know, that the feet, and which means that probably that was one of the first constellations that they could see.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the plasma sheet, you couldn't see the constellations before. And then the age of Taurus came after that, which was recorded as entering on the year 4000 BC.
Mm-hmm.
So then
Yeah.
you know that, you know that the different zodiacal entrances of times have come about during the times of the catastrophes. And that's because the Earth has changed axis. And then
Yes.
sees a different constellation.
Mm-hmm. This zodiac with its mysterious three Virgos between the constellations Leo and Libra. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, the Dendera zodiac in the Temple of Hathor in Egypt depicts the changes in ages. These changes that have happened due to planetary catastrophes. According to the ancient Egyptian priest and historian Manetho, who talks about this, during the period of the reign of the followers of Horus falls in the era of Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that probably Cancer was visible during that time. That's what they could see. After Atlantis sunk, not only the poles moved, but the Earth began to spin in the opposite direction. During the lifetime of the god Thoth, Earth had gone through 5 actual tilts or physical pole shifts. That's what they say. That's what they're saying. He saw the sun rise from the east, then from the west, then east and back to west. So 5 times the sun changed, the rising of.
I know you had periods too on Earth where there seemed to be really big people, and then there seemed to be really little people, and this would go a long way to explain a lot of that, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the different sizes. Exactly, the skeletons.
Now the
And
underground stuff,
okay,
Agartha,
so there's
Inner
more
Earth.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's more if people want to read more about the Dendera zodiac, how it just
Right.
points to the going back and forth, like it jumps. The passage of time is not continuous. It goes back and forth 3 times. So it's like, what happened? Well, there
Mm-hmm.
was catastrophes. So anyways, let's go
Yeah.
back to the underground systems. Where are you?
Yeah. I'm getting close to the bottom here.
What page?
Yeah. Page 27, right at the bottom of 27.
Okay.
That's quite detailed here. I mean, we could spend 4 hours talking about this. And we're at an
Yes.
hour and a half, so I don't want to go much longer. What we could probably do a couple. I would
Split
like to
it.
do. I would like
Yeah.
to do a live stream with you. I think what we could do is premiere this one and see how it goes. And if people have a lot
Okay.
of questions, then we can go back to it and do a live stream, and you can just answer questions directly from the folks.
Yes, they can also listen to some of the audiobooks if they
Oh, I
prefer
hope
to
that they
listen
do.
than to
Yeah.
read. That's probably easier to multitask than you can be listening. And if you find something interesting, you go, oh, I want to go
Yeah.
and check it
Yeah.
out.
Definitely.
And then they can ask you questions. I think I like that. And they can shoot you some questions. And it'd be nice if they actually send you the questions beforehand, and then I can think about it and
Oh,
research
yes. Yeah,
and
that
give an
is better.
answer. Then
Yeah, you
just
have. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, I mean we can also answer just questions as they pop up, of course,
Yes,
definitely.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
don't know everything, I don't have an amazing memory. I do kind
Mm.
of like see the big picture, and I can tell you a lot of like the big picture, but sometimes the details I have to look it up because
Well, you go through such a wide spectrum of
yeah, there's so
stuff
much
here, and
information.
you talk about the behemoth. It was a gigantic prehistoric male water mammal,
Yeah,
or a whale. The leviathan was a
yeah,
female equivalent.
exactly.
It devoured men, the watchers, and fallen angels.
Interesting.
RH negative. Yeah, you got so much here. It's just crazy. I've been getting into it for about 4 days, and I'm just scratched the surface here. So I
Yeah.
definitely recommend for any of you that have questions or want to know more, I will put the link in below for you to check out Tess's work. And well, Tess, do you have anything more to add?
No, I look forward to answering some questions if anyone is interested and like the work, and go for
Right.
the research. Go if you have the time. I know it takes time, but
Well, I think we all we all have that passion to want to know, and that's where it's just, I want to know. The whole situation with Uranus has always bugged me, and I think that this is an excellent expansion
yeah,
to teach me things that I may need for my puzzle. We all have our own puzzle, right?
exactly.
And we
Hopefully it
talked
helps
about
you.
that. And okay, well, I guess we could just call it a day here.
Thank you,
And
Greg.
oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's a delight to know you. I'm really glad you reached out to me, and I'm honored. Really, I
Oh, thank you.
appreciate that. And
Likewise.
well, we can keep in touch,
Okay.
and we'll see how it goes. Okay.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
All right. Take care. I'll talk
Bye.
to